Goodbye. Hello, Heisman.
20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. Oh, the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. Oh, no, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, we've got the battle for Indiana on a Friday night. The Hoosiers and the Fighting Irish will square off in South Bend. We pick that game straight up. Can Indiana pull off a miracle against Notre Dame? We've got SMU on the road in a whiteout condition against Penn State. And no, I'm not just talking about the crowd. Can the Mustangs beat Penn State in a snowy condition up in State College? Texas hosts Clemson in a battle of the orange on the 40 acres. And Ohio State puts Ryan Day's employment, his legacy, everything on the line as they host the Tennessee Volunteers. Gentlemen, all of that compiles to be the first ever first round of the 12-team college football playoff. We have waited so long for it. It's here. I'm ready to celebrate. How about you guys?
It's right there in my bio if you're watching on YouTube. I feel like a kid on Christmas Eve, man. It feels like something we've been waiting for so long. 4 meaningful playoff games hosted on campuses. I just can't wait to sit on my couch all weekend and consume every single one of these and talk about them with you guys afterwards.
Yeah, I feel like this is that moment where we get to go like, this is what we played for, right? We get to kind of get excited and say, you know, we break this down all year. We get excited about it all year. We talked about this as a good format for a little while, and we fought for it, and now we're finally here. We finally get these games, and yeah, I think it's something where none of us, I think, really fully know what to expect, but we're all super excited, and you know, I think all of us know that something special is about to happen.
I'm so excited to have these games here, but for me, the most exciting part, and I wrote about this in our article on a Substack, is the fact that these games are on campus. I cannot imagine all of these games being played elsewhere. And I know that, you know, the revenue and the TV money is never going to let the full thing be played on campus. But boy, it's hard not to be amped up to see a whiteout in State College with the snow falling and Penn State fans getting rowdy for SMU. Ohio State is going to have a lot to play for. You know, they're kind of supposedly defending the ticket lines from volunteer fans. There is just going to be a lot of storylines to watch for, and I'm excited that the home field advantage for these hosting teams is one of them. If you're new, if you found us through our playoff primer, welcome in to the 3 Technique college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. That's Trey Reeves, Garrett Turney. I'm Mitch Mason. We're glad to have you with us, and we would invite you to subscribe, like the channel wherever you're watching this, listening to it. YouTube, Spotify, Apple. You can find us on our social platforms as well at 3 Tech Pod. We'd love to have you as a part of the ride to finish out year 3, head into year 4 of the show. Guys, the show, as always, brought to you by the good brand homefieldapparel.com. You can use our code 3TechPod for 15% off your entire first order, or shop to the link in our bio, and you can get a discount and support the show that way as well. We know which side they're going to be rooting for this weekend on a Friday night. I think that's a great way to transition into our first matchup. Number 10, Indiana on the road at number 7, Notre Dame. This is Friday night, 7 p.m. Central Time. This is on ABC, ESPN, that family of networks. And guys, I think to kick this off, a good place to start is how many upsets do you think can happen this weekend? Indiana is certainly hoping they can get off on the right foot. But Trey, you were kind of wondering, if you set the line at 1.5 upsets, which side are you taking? And maybe is Indiana kicking this off?
Maybe it's just the optimist in me, and maybe it's just looking at how this season has turned out, because quite frankly, we've had a lot of interesting twists and turns throughout the year. I think I'd take the over cautiously on 1.5. It would not surprise me if multiple road teams came into another team's house and took a playoff game this week. It's going to be a weird environment for everybody. We got some weird time slots playing on when's the last time Notre Dame's played on a Friday night, if ever, right? Yeah. Not necessarily picking that game. We'll get to that in a second, but weird time slots, the pressure of playing a playoff game in front of a home crowd. That's just never happened before. I'm expecting some chaos this week, guys. So I'll take the over on 1.5 upsets.
Trey, I think I'm with you. The 1.5 is kind of tricky. Obviously, I think we all expect one of those games could go that way, but man, like I think I'm kind of with you. There's just a lot of flawed teams here. Like obviously, you're not going to be a perfect team, and if you were a perfect team, you're probably going to get one of those buys. But because these teams have some flaws, we've seen some issues with each of these teams hosting and each of these statistical favorites. I think it's reasonable to say that, yeah, like, any of these teams show up, have a good day, and do what they want to do, play their game. Any of these road teams could definitely come in there and shock that home stadium.
Well, if there's a team that has kind of built their very short reputation on shocking folks, it's Indiana, right? And Kirk Cignetti has turned that program around. He did it by going to the portal, finding proven starters, maybe guys that weren't 4 and 5 stars, but guys that had contributed to winning programs. And very quickly, he built a winning culture at Indiana. He has the confidence, the bravado, obviously, that comes with his reputation. He's kind of a pull up by your bootstraps kind of coach anyway, if you've listened to his journey to Indiana. And I think the Hoosiers certainly have that element of house money on their side, right? Indiana has built this thing very, very quickly. Their one loss to Ohio State didn't look great, playing against a team that was far more athletic, far more physical than you. But then again, maybe they learned a thing or two. They can find a way to exploit the weaknesses of Notre Dame. On the other side, though, the Irish have just kind of been quietly in the background. Since their week 2 loss to Northern Illinois, they've really drubbed their opponents. And there were a lot of questions about Notre Dame. Can they be stout enough on the offensive line? They lost 3 offensive line starters throughout the course of the season, starting with their left tackle in fall camp. The defensive line has also suffered some casualties and some injuries. Riley Leonard was not exactly an aerial assault waiting to happen through the air, but Notre Dame has figured out how to win this year, and Jeremiah Love has been a big part of that. So, guys, when I broke this game down on paper, Indiana has a number of stats that I think are eye-popping, right? And they're certainly impressive. Top 25 total offense, number 2 ranked scoring offense. Defense is actually ranked 2nd in the country in total defense. Their scoring defense ranks in the top 10. They're the top rushing defense statistically in the country. There's a lot of reasons on paper to like Indiana, but I guess I'll kick us off with our projections here. I've got Notre Dame defending home turf here. I'm going to take Notre Dame 24-14 over Indiana. I look at that Ohio State game and I go, when Indiana was forced to line up and win the line of scrimmage against a team that was superior to them in just about every way imaginable, Indiana really struggled to control the offensive line specifically. They could not control the interior. They couldn't get that running game going. Curtis Rourke had no time to pass the football. Notre Dame isn't quite Ohio State as far as the Jimmies and the Joes and the health goes, but I'm still going to lean on Notre Dame here at home to get a 10-point win.
When I wrote it down, I have it 10 points exactly as well. I've got Notre Dame 27-17. I think Indiana can score, but this is a Notre Dame team that has not played a 1-possession game since September 28th, guys. Yeah. That's how bad they've been beating the teams on their schedule. Obviously, it's not the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Like murderer's row of schedules, right? And Indiana can obviously say the same thing, but Notre Dame has been really, really impressive quietly, like you mentioned, Mitch, just kind of staying in the background, staying under the radar, but they've been just bludgeoning every single team on their schedule. The USC game was closer than the final score might appear, but they were firmly in control of that game for most of it. So I just like the defensive prowess of Notre Dame in this game. I think the closest thing that we've seen from Indiana is that Ohio State game, and it just didn't go well after that first scripted drive. I think Indiana will get their points. I think they'll get a few yards, but Notre Dame's just going to be too physical for my money, and I'll take them to win by about 10 points as well.
Yeah, this is the game I feel the most confident picking. I think Notre Dame wins, and it's going to be fairly convincing. My final score here is actually going to be 27-10. I don't really give the Hoosiers much of a chance here. I know it's kind of bah humbug and curmudgeon-y here. But really my big thing is, when I was looking at some of the stats and breaking it down, I'm looking at like the passing proficiency for Indiana versus Notre Dame, and I'm thinking, whoa, they got a real chance. And then my eye just barely caught their rushing numbers, which is the stuff you need to go on the road and actually take care of business. In their 2 games for Indiana where they really played decent competition, and again, I'm not trying to trash the rest of the Big Ten, but when you look at their biggest games, Michigan and Ohio State, their rushing numbers 40 yards and 83 yards. That's good for 1.4 and 2 yards per carry, respectively. Notre Dame is stout. They can get it done. They get after you on the defensive side. And if you're facing a bunch of long downs and thick boxes, I just don't like Indiana's chances in this one. I think it's a bad matchup for them. And I just think Notre Dame's going to find a way to hold on to the ball, get their short fields, convert, score points, and put this one away fairly early. I don't think this is super competitive by the time we hit the fourth quarter.
Yeah, this feels like a bad matchup for Indiana because Notre Dame likes to play press man coverage on the outside. They've got the cornerbacks to be able to do that. Their safeties have done a nice job controlling the tight ends throughout the season. And so what that means is you're going to have routine 6, 7, maybe 8-man boxes if you've got a blitz coming, where Indiana, their success comes from establishing the run and throwing it off of that. And I know Curtis Rourke and Elijah Surratt and the wide receivers have gotten a lot of run this year, but the running game has been very consistent. And, you look at the game against Washington, for instance, the running game was the most consistent thing that the Hoosiers had going for them in a very close game. If Indiana can't run the football, I have a really hard time thinking that Curtis Rourke is going to find his spots to pick on man-to-man coverage on the outside from these Fighting Irish corners. Now, there obviously is a world where Indiana can pull a Herculean upset. I don't think they've played since maybe 91 or 92. Notre Dame won that game. So, I mean, this would be kind of Rudy in reverse, right, for the Hoosiers. My question for you guys is, what is the path to victory for Indiana?
I think it's relying on their defense. I think getting a bunch of stops and frustrating that Notre Dame offense, which, again, has been really underrated this year. Riley Leonard really came into his own after that NIU loss, and they found a way to make him work in that offense. But I think it's relying on the defense and turning this into an uglier, low-scoring game. Trying to out-physical Notre Dame on the ground offensively is going to be a really difficult task for the Hoosiers. But I think if they can stifle the run game for Notre Dame, force some 3-and-outs early, maybe pick up a turnover and get a short field, that would be huge for their chances.
Well, and Trey, kind of to that point, I think one of the best ways they could have a good chance here is get a quick lead, right? Go get out 10-0 or 14-0 real quick and put Notre Dame in a position to have to win through the air. I just don't think they're going to be able to win through the air consistently. I think that's ultimately what's going to hold Notre Dame back in terms of their title aspirations. But if they want to come out here and jump out real quick, maybe get like you were saying, Trey, get a quick turnover, do something good with their first drive, maybe start with the ball, scripted something really nice. If you can get out here, go up 10-0 or 14-0 and make Notre Dame feel like they got to throw the ball to get back into this thing, that's where I think you can take advantage of some of the weaknesses on their offense. Otherwise, if you let them be balanced on offense, if you let them kind of pick up their little 10 to 12 yard hitters in the air and mostly just run the ball, it's going to be lights out and it's going to be a long day for you and keeping your defense on the field and stuff like that.
I think Jeremiah Love has a big game for Notre Dame in this one as well. He's got almost 1,000 yards from scrimmage on the season, 15 touchdowns, and I believe he's going for nearly 7 yards a carry right now. If you hadn't heard of Jeremiah Love, you did. Seeing him hurdle a couple of defenders in the USC game. He's been very consistent for Notre Dame all season long. Riley Leonard, as you mentioned, has come along as a passer. Trey, he can do it on the ground as well. I think there's few too many weapons. It's just too composed of a battle station for Marcus Freeman, who also got a 4-year extension there in South Bend. We'll talk about coaching and carousels and transfer portal and all that. We've got plenty of time as the offseason matriculates on. But yeah, very excited for Notre Dame. They're intent on winning a national championship. It feels like Marcus Freeman might be the guy to get him there. Let's go to Saturday morning. That's a standalone game on Friday night, kind of an appetizer to a full slate of games on Saturday that starts in Happy Valley. Penn State, the 6th seed, hosting number 11 SMU, Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Central Time. This is on TNT. This is one of those kind of subleasing specials that they've got going on. So
do we get Chuck and the crew on the NBA today or inside the NBA
goodness,
crew?
I would love that.
Please. Oh God, please.
That would be fantastic. The biggest thing that when I saw the TV breakdown, congrats to TNT. What does it take for Penn State to get a home game at night? They're playing all of their games at noon Eastern. And, it's going to be a fun environment. But, boy, those students have to be just beyond mad to not get to play a big game under the lights. I mentioned off the top, it's supposed to be snowy at least, snowy conditions. There's a good deal of snow on the ground, as you've probably seen on Twitter right now. It's been 70 and
29
muggy.
is the high currently projected.
Yeah, that's brutal. Wind chill in the teens. It's 70 and muggy here in Dallas, so a little bit of an environment change, to say the least, for the Mustangs. First off, have to give our flowers to SMU. I mean, this is a team that, it was a sexy pick to run through a weaker ACC schedule. It was certainly a forgiving schedule that they got as they joined the Power Four ranks. But this was also a team that had no history of winning against the top tier competition, at least not in recent years, right? I mean, Rhett Lashlee, that was kind of the one thing that was missing from his American tenure at SMU, was beating Power Four teams. And he'd been close against TCU and Oklahoma and Boston College in the Fenway Bowl, but he was just still missing that win. And then SMU goes on a tear this year, and they rebounded after the loss from BYU. They commit to Kevin Jennings. And ever since then, it really has been same pony, new express for SMU. On the other side, for Penn State, I'm stuck coming back to the question, can James Franklin win a big game? The facts are that he is 3-19 against top 10 teams in his coaching career. He is winless against top 5 teams since he got to Penn State. Now, fortunately for him, SMU is neither a top 10 or a top 5 team, so maybe the technicality doesn't apply. But let's start there. Are you concerned about Penn State and their coaching staff in this game?
Absolutely. I think you haven't been paying attention to the last 10 years of college football almost, if you're not concerned about that at least a little bit. It seems like Penn State always does fine when the spotlight is off of them, but when the spotlight's shining brightest, they have not performed well, regardless of if it's against a ranked team or if it's Ohio State, Michigan, someone else in the Big Ten. Like, I know they played well against Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, but they still came up short in that one. When the spotlight's shining the brightest, Penn State has not risen to the occasion way more often than not under James Franklin, and that's big alarm bells going off for me.
I do think, to give him a little bit of credit, and again, this is really difficult to do when you are, 3-19 or whatever it is, to give him a little bit of credit, it's been closer this year, right? I think that's why they're in this position they're in. They haven't really lost the weird off game, and obviously Ohio State, that's a 7-point loss, and, Oregon, they came up short by 8. They've been closer. It feels like it's been a lot harder and a lot further away for Penn State. It's always kind of felt to me like when you watch Penn State out there, in the Big Ten, you put them up there against Ohio State, or, when Michigan's been good, or, even sometimes when Michigan State's been good, it's always felt like they're kind of just we're okay, but we don't really have what it takes. We don't really belong on the same field as y'all. It didn't look like that to me this year. It looked like, you weren't there, you didn't win, you didn't quite get it done, couldn't push it across the finish line, but you belonged on the same field. You were that team that deserved to be on the same field and in that conversation. And so while they didn't get it done so far this year, I'm not so sure that can't start up this weekend.
I'm really fascinated to see how Penn State holds up in the trenches. I'm sure a lot of people, the first thing that they think of when they think of SMU is not how stout they've been on the offensive and defensive line, but when you look at the numbers and when you put the tape on, that's exactly what SMU has kind of built their winning ways on. The offensive line was shaky, to say the least, to start out the season, but they've really progressed this year. The defensive line, Rhett Lashlee built through the portal. I mean, this is a bunch of D1, of course, FBS, Power 4 transfers. A lot of them coming from that Miami pipeline that Lashlee established when he was the offensive coordinator there. It's a lot of beef up the middle, and it's a lot of speed off the edges. And so SMU, coming into this, actually has the 4th ranked rushing defense in the country. They're giving up less than 3 yards per carry. Well, guys, Penn State's offense, as much as the flash and sizzle of Andy Kotelnicki's scheme is displayed through the air, Penn State's offense goes on the ground. They are the 19th ranked rushing attack in the country, 202 yards on the ground. The law firm of Allen and Singleton has been the bread and butter for Penn State. So I'll throw it back to you guys. The numbers for SMU are impressive, but they also are prone to give up some chunk plays. Does Penn State have an outright advantage in the run game, or is that something that you think maybe keeps this closer than the experts are predicting?
I'll do you one further, Mitch. I'll take SMU to win this one outright. I got it to score somewhere around the 30 to 27 range. I think it'll be close, but running the football and being able to stop the run, that's going to travel. No matter how cold it is, no matter if it's snowing, you can win games by running the football and stopping the run. Both of these teams are doing that quite well. But when Penn State's either had a scare this year or outright lost the game that they lost to Ohio State, they gave up over 4 yards a carry. That's only happened 3 times this year. It was against Bowling Green, which, if you remember, was almost a second massive MAC upset in week 2 that had to Notre Dame. It happened against Ohio State when they actually did lose. And then it happened against Oregon when they lost the Big Ten championship game. If SMU can average over 4 yards a carry, I think that they can win this game, because that's going to put the Penn State defense on its heels, a position that they're not typically in. And I think SMU has the horses to do it. If they can keep that up all game, that's going to be a dogfight all the way to the end. And I think they can find a way to pull it out.
I think this is your proof that teams are going to need their home field. I think this is going to be the first game where you really see it come into play. Obviously, it's the way that it is, you'd rather have the home field, but I think home field gets Penn State across the line. I think if they play this one in Dallas, SMU has a real shot at winning, because they're going to be playing this one in extreme cold. Something that a lot of these guys, from SMU is probably not used to, probably not going to, be super familiar with. At least the quarterback, we know quarterback's been a Texas boy, so we're not really concerned about, or we're not really, I don't think projecting him to go up there and handle himself that well in the cold. I just think Penn State has the advantage. You add that with the whiteout, the fact that they got their home field. Yes, I get it. It's not a night game, all right? And I'd rather that game be a night game, right? It's a tragedy they can't get whiteout at home at night. That's a little bit of a disappointing one, but I just think that environment, that stadium, that crowd, plus the fact that you're putting a good team on the field that can run the football. And I think because this game is going to be so cold and a little bit messy, I do think that it's going to make this a very run heavy type game. I know that SMU's done it so far this year. I think that runs out when you let Penn State just kind of load the box and do their thing. So I'm going to take this one to be kind of a yucky, low scoring game. Give me something like 17-7 or 20-10, but I'm going to take Penn State to come out on top.
I think this one does have a flavor that favors Penn State here because of the weather. I don't necessarily know that I'm expecting Kevin Jennings not to handle himself exclusively because of the cold, but KJ has turned the ball over quite a few times this year, and that was what got them behind the sticks early against Clemson, a couple of bad turnovers, and then the defense does give up some chunk plays. And if Penn State can establish that running game to any degree of efficiency early, I think that opens up the play action playbook for Kotelnicki and Drew Aller, who, by the way, congratulations to him. He's coming back for his senior season. I think that's a massive win for Penn State and their championship hopes, not only, obviously the rest of this playoff run, but next year as well. I think the playbook for Penn State is going to be much more open potentially than SMU's playbook is. Penn State takes care of the football a little bit better than SMU does. And I think the bigger bodies over and over again, the depth for Penn State's defensive line, their linebackers as well. I mean, you talk about Abdul Carter getting to come off the edge. I think maybe this is where the magic for the Express runs out a little bit. I've got it in a lower scoring game. I think Penn State maybe scores a touchdown late to win this one 27-21. I think this is going to be a fascinating game, though. I don't know that there's a lot of separation between these two teams. If the weather is truly a neutralizing factor, I think this is going to be a quick game on Saturday morning, especially if there aren't a lot of turnovers. So you blink and you might miss this one in Happy Valley, but I'm going to take Penn State to win as well. I'll flip you this bonus question. If Penn State wins this one, but then loses in their next game, and they've got, Boise State, does James Franklin's legacy or his reputation, does it upgrade at all if he goes 1-1 in that scenario?
Not if they lose to Boise State. I love the Boise State Broncos this year. They're one of my favorite teams in all of college football, and I think that they're criminally underrated, and they're going to pose a problem. But from a perception standpoint, that would be a not good look.
I'm with you. Yeah, you got to win both of those games if you want an increase. I don't think it decreases if you lose to Boise. I think if you lose to SMU, you could be talking about a decrease to the legacy. But I just don't think that you make much of a change by losing to Boise. I think that's just kind of like, okay, we tried.
I think SMU and Penn State is the one that I'm most interested to watch because I think it can go either way on the flip of a coin. I'm sure Tennessee and Ohio State will be a popular pick as well. We'll get to them at the end. But next we go to the 40 acres. We've got the 5 seed Texas hosting number 12 Clemson, the ACC champs, thanks to their win over SMU. This is Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m. Central, again on TNT. And guys, I wrote about this as well. When I picked Clemson to win the ACC championship game, I did not pick them to go down the path that they did. The Dabo experience this year was all kinds of roller coasters. They get destroyed by Georgia. They get really embarrassed by Louisville on their home field. Seem like they maybe figure out some offensive things, and then, oh man, they get held to 14 against South Carolina in the season finale. They have to go then win the ACC championship game just to get in as the 12 seed. They're taking on a Texas Longhorns team that has looked complete all year long, except for their 2 games against the Georgia Bulldogs, where it felt like multiple missed opportunities and turnovers were the story of the game there. I wrote that the lazy take here is that Clemson has looked bad against anybody with a pulse, the SMU game excluding, and because Texas is an upper echelon team, that they're going to win by 2 scores. That's what you're seeing from a lot of folks kind of around the country, that this is the least interesting of the 4 playoff games. And then you listen to some of our social circle. You listen to the Walk On Red Shirts podcast. I know that Always Talking Ball certainly is maybe going to give Clemson a little bit of run here. And there's a lot of people that are starting to pick Clemson just kind of for the fact that, well, Clemson's dangerous. The best of Clemson looks really good. And if they catch Texas on the right day, maybe the Tigers and Cade Klubnik going home. That's a storyline drawn up in Hollywood. I'll throw it to you guys first. Your initial leaning when you saw this matchup, where did you go? Did you instantly give it to Texas, or did you have to think about it?
I instantly gave it to Texas, but I don't think that this is going to be a game that they just run away with. I think it'll probably be another one like Texas A&M, like Arkansas, like so many of their conference games this year, where they feel like they're in control, but there's just 1 or 2 plays that give Clemson hope and keep us watching the entire time. I don't think this will be a laugher by any stretch of the imagination, but I've said it time and time again when we talk about Clemson in this late run up in the season, pretty much ever since they lost to Louisville, where are the explosive plays going to come from? Where are they going to get a game-changing play on offense that really sets them up? You mentioned it in the SMU breakdown, Mitch. They got out to that big lead against SMU because of turnovers and because of some really fortunate situations in that first opening 10 minutes of the game. If SMU can go back and replay that, that might not be a close game in favor of SMU. So I think Clemson will keep it close, but it'll be more because Texas has just failed to capitalize on big opportunities and big moments this year. They keep the game under control, but they keep it way more interesting than they need to. And I think we'll see that again.
Yeah, for me, when I saw this matchup, my first thought was, oh man, Texas fans have got to be pissed, right? Because, I think a lot of them were thinking, oh, we'll get SMU, and SMU's a little bit maybe down on the talent. They haven't been there. Maybe the moment gets too bright. We can get to them in Austin, blah, blah, blah. And then, my next thought was just kind of like, man, if Clemson shows up, Texas is in real trouble. Because when Clemson's looked good this year, they've been a very good team. And a lot of the stuff that they do, I think plays well when they're playing well, right? If they're showing up, Cade Klubnik looks good. He's able to sling it around. I think he can get the ball behind the defense. I think they can keep Texas off balance if they show up well. Now, when they don't show up, it's a major problem, and there's a real issue with Clemson not showing up in some of these big games. But guys, for me, it has a lot more to do with Texas having not really convinced me yet. They've looked really good in certain phases. They've looked really good for points in time, But just kind of going back through the schedule, like they just lost to Georgia. It's a very good Georgia team, but they did lose to a backup quarterback. You know, they beat A&M. That was a good win on the road, but really only by 10. Didn't look super convincing on the offensive side of the ball during that. They kind of messed around with Kentucky before they finally finished them off. You know, they only beat Arkansas by 10 on the road. They did beat a very good Florida team, but that wasn't a DJ Lagway Florida team. Vanderbilt, they won by 3. Georgia, before that, they lost by 15 at home. You go back to the schedule, and I'm just like, man, when was the last time I really saw Texas looking like a team that was just head and shoulders above the rest of them? I think you got to go back to Red River. And for me, that's not a thing where I'm super confident about Texas's chances to make a deep run, because I got to see them put it all together, right? They've looked good on offense at times. They've looked good at defense at times. They've looked good, you know, throughout the year at different points in time. They just hadn't really put it all together in a full 4 quarters effort against a good quality team for me. And a little bit, so a lot of this just comes down to who's real, right? For me, who is the real team? Is Texas the real team? Can they put it together, you know, beat a really good Clemson team? Or can Clemson show up and prove that, like, yeah, we're streaky, but right now we're hot, right? We're actually the hot team. We deserve to be here. We fixed our issues. That's behind us. Here's who we are. We found it at the right time.
The issue for Texas this year has not been on the defensive side. They're the third total defense in the country, second ranked in scoring, first in passing, 9th in sacks. I mean, they've just torn teams up on the defensive side. Where Texas has really lacked this year is in red zone efficiency. They can drive the ball down to the 20-yard line and inside of it. But once that field shortens, Quinn Ewers really becomes a different quarterback. In fact, I looked it up. They're 93rd in the country in red zone efficiency this year at just 81%. And guys, they're only scoring a touchdown about 66% of the time. So for Clemson, that's, I think, going to be their big hope, is the bend don't break defense. Bert Auburn has not looked bulletproof this year. Place kicking for the Longhorns, we saw that a couple times against Georgia. It looked like, you know, us on the tee box there on number 10, just a case of the snap hooks. The problem for me with picking Clemson, and I think Clemson can potentially stay in this game, but the problem for me is that when Clemson is going well, it's through those chunk plays. We've talked about that metric a couple of times so far here tonight. Clemson, even though they're the 12th ranked total offense in the country, they're not one of the more efficient offenses in the country. They get a lot of their yardage and their scoring set up by the big play. The problem is Texas doesn't give up the big play at all, guys. They've given up 40 plays of 20-plus yards all season. That's it. Clemson, on the other hand, has given up over 120 plays of 20-plus yards. For me, Texas, and statistically, they're an average running team. We saw what they can do against Texas A&M when they stretch the field, right? Those wide receivers with the post, double moves, etc. Quinn Ewers was able to deliver the ball on a dime down the field, and then they were able to run the ball off of that. You can swap those as well. The run set up the pass. But for me, the playbook was completely open in College Station. Georgia's defense took away the running game, and they made Quinn try and beat them, and that was just something that he wasn't able to do. Unfortunately for Clemson, that's not their MO. They're 73rd in rush defense. So if you can't take away the line of scrimmage from Texas and force Quinn to beat you with his arm, I'm struggling to find an advantage that Clemson has here over Texas, not to mention that they're going on the road. The Cade Klubnik storyline is amazing, and I'm rooting for the kid. I think going back to his state champ at Austin Westlake, I think that's amazing. I hope he gets a great reception.
Knocked off Quinn Ewers in that state championship.
He did, and dominated Quinn Ewers. But I'm going to take Texas in this one, 31-21. I think Texas's defense controls Clemson for enough of the game where the Longhorns can either get a lead or claim it late. I'll take the home team.
Is it safe to say, guys, that this game will be as close as the number of Texas turnovers allows it to be? Because Clemson does take the ball away at a very high rate. I think they have like 26 takeaways this year, 25
interceptions.
Yeah, 15 interceptions. And Texas has given the ball away 22 times this year. So I think that might tell your whole story of your game, not to oversimplify it, but Texas being able to take care of the football might be the only path to actually running away with this one. If they play like they have most of the year, then it's not going to be a runaway situation.
Yeah, I've been wishy-washy on what I think the final result's probably going to end up being in this one. For me, if good Clemson shows up, I probably pick them 2 or 3 times out of 3. If it's Texas, showing up and Clemson shows up as kind of the bad team that they have been at times, I'm picking them no times out of 3 because I think Texas is good enough to take care of bad Clemson. I'm kind of wishy-washy on this one. I've kind of been sitting here, but then I realized that I said I felt good about the over for the 1.5 upsets on the weekend. I hadn't picked an upset yet. So I think I'm going to go ahead and go with Clemson to take this upset just so that my math works out there. I do think that the scenario here is Cade Klubnik just plays hero ball. He's been fantastic. He's got 40 touchdowns on the year between throwing and running. He's only thrown 5 picks. Quinn Ewers, kind of on the other side of it, thrown 9 picks this year, only 25 touchdowns. Comparatively, Cade's the better quarterback here. I think I trust him to be the better quarterback right now. And, when everything's kind of going wrong and when everything isn't working out, I'll take Cade Klubnik to figure it out and get over the top.
So when you say good Clemson can beat Texas, you said 2 or 3 times out of 3. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's something like that. It's 2 or 3 times out of 3. I'm not exactly obviously this isn't exact sciences or math or anything like this. I just think if we give them a 3-game series, if Clemson shows up and is very good, they're beating them 2 times, maybe 3 times.
Okay, so tell me why though. Like when you say good Clemson, what does that mean?
That's the Clemson where Cade Klubnik's slinging it, man. Like it's really not a whole bunch of big statistical breakdown. It's just looking at the film and realizing like when Cade is slinging it and he's feeling it, he gets in that zone. Like we all anticipated, again, going back to the high school days, like we all anticipated Cade was going to have an awesome career, and he kind of had a little bit of failure to launch the first little bit of his career, but man, he is just rocketing out of the gates here. And I see a quarterback that's playing with a lot of confidence. I see a quarterback that's playing like he's got nothing to lose. And the thing for me this year was I expected Phil Moffitt to be so much more of their offense. He's got 1,100 yards rushing. That's not nothing by any means, but he's only ran the ball 214 times for a workhorse, like stallion type running back. It's not that many rushing attempts. And so while he's certainly a big part of the offense, and I do think he'll be a real tool for them, they've really just taken Cade Klubnik and said, this is you. Like, this is the Cade Klubnik show. We're going to find a way to make you shine. Their defense is plenty good. Trey kind of mentioned it, the turnovers and being able to go get turnovers. If they're going to be able to get a couple of turnovers, if they're going to be able to stop Texas in the red zone a couple times, if they're going to be able to, if there's going to be a couple missed kicks from Auburn, I just kind of start to sit here and say, I think I trust Cade Klubnik to put this ball in the end zone a couple of times, whereas I don't necessarily trust Quinn or, if it's Trey Wisner getting it going or whoever it is having to make a play in that red zone. I don't really trust Texas to put it in and convert those, 6 points instead of 3 points. I think probably a couple of times they end up coming up a little bit short, and I think that'll be the difference for Clemson.
I just think it would have to be good Clemson plus extra bad Texas to be that scenario for me, because yes, I do agree that Cade Klubnik has been a more consistent quarterback this year than Quinn Ewers, and he has elevated his team more than Quinn has. But that Texas defense isn't something that you can just ignore and toss out. It has made much better offenses than Clemson's look extremely pedestrian this year. So it would have to be something that combined Quinn playing lights out and the Texas defense just looking lost for my money to make it that big of a difference. I
will say I don't think Texas has played a quarterback like Cade this year. And that's obviously saying like, okay, obviously, they've been good quarterbacks. They've played good quarterbacks on the schedule, but I don't think there's anybody that's come close to what Cade's done. Cade's having a phenomenal year, kind of overlooked just because obviously they lose 3 games, but I think he's been a little overlooked for the fact that he's a quarterback with, 40 touchdowns in the playoffs. That's a kind of a bizarre thing to me that we're not just sitting here like, so Cade's going to make the run, right? Like Cade's going to go on some legacy generational run that Clemson fans will be talking about for decades, right? That it's weird to me that we're not having that conversation more just because Texas has looked good on defense. Like I'm not going to doubt that Texas has looked really good on defense, but I think Cade can figure that out and weather the storm.
They did make Carson Beck, who's a top 10 quarterback this year, when he's not turning it over, look extraordinarily average. So I think they've
say
risen.
It like you mean it, Mitch. Come on, say it like you actually think Carson Beck's the top 10 quarterback.
Well, when he's not turning the ball over, his numbers speak for themselves.
There are a couple of ifs in there for me. I was like, I don't know, man. When Carson Beck, when he's not turning the ball over, if he's healthy, and when his eyes don't bug out
He
the way
didn't
that they
turn the
do.
ball over until he played in a Mike Bobo scheme. So I'll give him that.
That is fair. That is fair.
And Beck's turnovers are isolated to a five game stretch, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he's an NFL prospect, but from what he's done in college this year, I think he was 7 of 13 for 660 yards, something like that, in the first half before he got hurt.
Mhm.
I'll say this: I think out of all the teams that are waiting in the quarterfinals, obviously, I think traditionally you would say, yeah, I would prefer to see the lower seed. Arizona State awaits the winner of this game, and they do not match up at all with the Texas Longhorns. If they get Clemson, though, if Clemson is able to pull off a miracle run, and Cade is able to go Superman in Austin, Arizona State is going to be flipping back handsprings, because then you're going to have a matchup between two teams that really don't play a lot of defense in a phone booth. It's a lot of big plays, and okay, can we get how many yards out of this chunk play can we get? That might be just a boat racing from both sides, an absolute sprint. So we'll obviously wait and see who we get in the second round. I think Arizona State, though, out of the 4 teams waiting, is praying that Clemson is able to get through here. Let's go to the final game, and this is the nightcap. Number 9 Tennessee at number 8 Ohio State. Saturday night, 7 p.m. again on ABC or ESPN. So make sure that you don't forget what channel that is. You'll tune it away from TNT. Guys, again, temperature check here. Ryan Day might be coaching for his job in this game. After losing to Michigan, it feels like the rumors and everything has just spun out of control. The one thing that maybe is saying Ryan Day keeps his job is Ross Bjork has come out and said, I have a great relationship with Ryan Day. So weed through all of the posturing and the politicking. At the very least, if Ryan Day loses this game, he's giving back some of his salary, right? Like a la Brian Kelly or Mike Norvell.
I don't know how much else you could ask of for Ryan Day, because they already kind of did the buy the best team money can buy angle. That's what Brian Kelly's doing right now in Baton Rouge in the transfer portal. And if you've already played that card, what do you do next? Because it's going to be really interesting to see, is this solely just a Michigan seeing ghosts problem when he sees maize and blue on the opposing sideline, or is it really something where it's a deeper issue than that, and it's a can't win a big game issue?
I think this is a little off that, but I think my favorite thing I saw on Twitter this week had to do with that, and the idea that some Ohio State pages were posting, hey, whoa, that's crazy. I heard there's going to be a drone show, and it was just a drone show that said "Fire Ryan Day" in big red letters in the sky over the shoe. So I think there's a lot of people that are a little bit upset about this. I think outside of winning the title, I don't think Ohio State fans are going to be happy at the end of the season. Even if they make it to the title game, but lose to, Oregon or someone, or I guess that wouldn't be Oregon. That'd be the next matchup. But Georgia or someone like that, if they come up short in the title game, even, I think that would be a big issue still for Ohio State fans, where they're saying it might be time to go for our guy, Ryan Day.
What I do know is neither one of these fan bases will handle a loss in this game very well.
No.
From what I've seen on Twitter. Also, I thought you were going to say temperature check for just like the game, so I did pull that up, Mitch, when you said
chilly.
Temperature. It's 30 degrees high, 22 low, looking like a wind chill around 15 to 20 degrees.
Yep.
So,
yeah, I wrote it.
I saw some people from Ohio were shocked to learn that Knoxville, Tennessee is in the mountains this week. So I don't think Tennessee is. Yeah, I don't think Tennessee is going to be as affected by this as maybe like SMU or somebody like that.
Golly, we love a good geography lesson with our college football. I think the weather is going to provide a fantastic Midwest backdrop for this. As you mentioned, not necessarily the road bump for Tennessee that it might be for a couple of these other teams. Let's get into the matchup here. I think for me, the X factor, and I've said this all season long, is Jim Knowles for Ohio State. Tennessee, I guess I was telling you guys this before we hit record. Tennessee has the 8th ranked total offense, the 8th ranked scoring offense in the country. Okay, great. You dive into the numbers, though, and they've done all of their damage against the Kent States and the UTEPs on their schedule, and it hasn't really translated over to SEC play. So I'm initially concerned there. Nico Iamaleava has been good at times. He's looked overwhelmed at others. He's got a big arm, and sometimes it's difficult for him to rein that in. We watched him overthrow a lot of wide open receivers early on in the season. But they've got Dylan Sampson, who's got over 1,600 yards from scrimmage. He's done a tremendous job this year scoring the ball for the Volunteers. And so maybe if Tennessee can rely on the running game, there's certainly a case where they can walk into the shoe and win this game. For me, I know a lot of people have this on a razor-thin margin. I know a lot of people are picking Tennessee to win this game. So are you guys in the Volunteer Orange camp?
I've got Tennessee 23-17 in this one.
Okay.
And I think it's not so much the Jim Knowles defense. I think that will cause a lot of problems for the Tennessee offense. I think it's the Tennessee defense that's going to feast on a beat-up Ohio State offensive line all year long. We've been talking about just how difficult that is to overcome for the Buckeyes, both in the passing game and protecting Will Howard, and also in the running game and getting consistent yardage on the ground. We saw how much of a struggle that was against Michigan. I think Tennessee has the ability to turn this into a game like Michigan can, where it's just a grinded out game. That's how they like to win games this year. Grind it out on the ground with Dylan Sampson, like you said, and play elite defense, especially with the good to elite defensive linemen that they have, both inside and outside. So I think that's a really bad matchup for Ohio State. Personally, I think Tennessee is going to win this one outright and move on to the next round.
Trey, I'm with you, man. This is how I make my other bit of the two upsets from the original prediction in the show. I think Tennessee wins this one. I do think it'll be a little bit more of the low scoring, not really the anticipated, high vaunted offenses we might have thought we would have had at the beginning of the season. I think if you said these two teams match up in the playoff at the beginning of the year, everyone's guessing the final score is going to be, 49-45. I think this thing's a lot, lower, obviously, because neither of these offenses have looked necessarily like world beaters, down the stretch. But I think this one probably turns into more of a, 20-17 type of game where Tennessee can come out on top. Now, the way that I make that is by saying a couple of things. Number one, Tennessee's given up over 150 yards rushing just twice this year. They've kept it under 150 in 10 of their 12 games. And I think Ohio State's going to need to run the football to keep that offense balanced, but to give them a chance to win. Like you saw what happened when Michigan took away the run. They just didn't work as an offense. They didn't have the guys. I don't know if it was, they didn't pay enough money. Maybe should have spent $30 million on a class or something. But I don't know what it was. They just didn't have it on the offensive side when you took away the run game. Whereas I think, for Tennessee, Trey, you were talking about them being able to feast up on the trenches. I also think that applies on the offensive side. I think they're going to be able to get it done in the run game. They've ran the ball extremely well this year. And a lot of this calculation for me doesn't expect very much of Nico, but we know he's got it in there. We know that Nico has that talent in there. They've been passing the ball a little bit better as of late. Went for 257 and 4 touchdowns against Vanderbilt to finish the season. So whatever you think of Vanderbilt's defense, I guess that's one thing, but 4 touchdowns isn't anything to sneeze at. If Nico can show up and give you a respectable, 250 yards passing, couple touchdowns, I think this is an amazing scenario for Tennessee where you can pull away. I think when I'm calculating this whole thing out, I don't expect Tennessee to get very much through the air, and I still think they win this thing, 20-17. But Nico shows up, it could get a little bit uglier for the Buckeyes. And if Ohio State loses big at home, it's going to get real ugly in Columbus for Ryan Day and company.
It is concerning how much Will Howard just disappeared in the Michigan game. And remember, this is a Wolverines team that did not have Will Johnson, that did not have Colson Loveland. They were missing a couple of their big X-factor guys, and yet Ohio State just looked dead in the water for most of that game. I'm going the other way. I'm going to take Ohio State. So for those that are keeping track at home, yeah, that is chalk. I'm going 4 home teams in this one. I'll take Ohio State 24-21, and here's why. Tennessee for whatever reason, has looked lifeless in the first half of a lot of their games this year. They were shut out in 3 first halves, basically a calendar month of first halves, including at home. Ohio State has the best total defense in the country. And I mentioned the blitz packages, the disguise coverage looks that Jim Knowles is going to throw against Nico Iamaleava. That concerns me. Now, the strength of Tennessee, Garrett, like you said, is running the ball. The problem is Ohio State is only giving up 2.8 a carry. They've got a top 7 rush defense. They've got the second-ranked pass defense and a top 20 sack artist unit as well. Ohio State doesn't have to do a lot offensively to win this game, I don't think. I think there's a world where, kind of flipping it on its head, where you guys are taking Tennessee to kind of be offensively average. I think there's a path where Ohio State is very offensively average. And I think that's ultimately what's going to keep them from winning a national championship is Will Howard and the inability at times to get the ball out wide to the treasure trove of wide receivers. The running game hasn't been overly special this year. It certainly disappeared at times. And I think part of that is because of the injuries along the offensive line. So no matter which way you slice it, I think this is a low-scoring game. I think this is another one that's going to be relatively quick. Of course, without the 3-minute commercials and all the media buy and stuff like that. We don't have a Dr. Pepper halftime challenge, right? No chest passes that we have to suffer through again this week. Is that right?
Not that I'm aware of, but we will get plenty of Dr. Pepper commercials in the commercial breaks. I didn't say this when you said the other one was going to be quick, Mitch. If you think that these TV executives have been sitting on a 12-team playoff for 4 years and they're going to let it be under 4 hours of time that we're locked in on a standalone game, I've got a bridge to sell you, my friend. I'm really sorry.
When you look at the typical TV spacings versus what they currently have, you can tell that these games are going to stretch. They're going to get every ounce out of these games. And they're going to make sure that they get their money's worth.
The guy with the red sleeve is going to come out. It's going to be 5 minutes on his clock instead of 3 minutes. That might have been the saddest part of my college experience, watching that go from 90 seconds to 2 minutes and a half down to 3 full minutes, all within the span, I think, of my collegiate career. It just, it's just the number just kept climbing up.
Don't worry, Mitch. It'll be 3:30 next year.
Oh gosh,
it is 3:30.
It's already 3:30. Yeah, 3:45. Go for it.
It's like the Dr. Pepper commercial. Our whole viewing experience is just a commercial. So, you guys are taking Tennessee. I'll take Ohio State. We would love to know which side of this matchup you guys are on. Let us know at 3TechPod. You can write in, email the show as well, 3techpod@gmail.com. Let us know which side of the 4 games that you're picking, how many upsets that you have, and maybe as a special teaser, if you want a little extra credit, let us know which matchup in the second round, based off your winners, you would be most looking forward to. We'd love to break that down, talk that with you in the comments on YouTube, on Spotify, or on Apple as well. Well, that'll do it for us. We're excited to watch this. We'll be live tweeting the game. We'll have content for you. We will have a live show Saturday night after Ohio State and Tennessee goes final. I'm not sure where you guys will be. I will be in a Des Moines basement. Watch the live show just to see what my background is. I don't entirely know, but that'll be interesting.
I'm not 100% sure where I will be, but I'll tell you with 1,000% clarity, I will not be in a Des Moines basement.
Well, I will not be in a Des Moines basement either. That sounds like a very interesting nightclub that you're going to be at. So
welcome to the Des Moines basement.
Yeah, this place has everything. I'll be right here in this chair, and I'll be ready to rock and roll with you guys.
Friday night, it's going to be funny. My wife and I are driving up to Iowa for Christmas. We have already configured the driving schedule, the shift change, to where I can be in the passenger seat while Indiana Notre Dame is playing. We've got to leave later in the day.
Passenger princess.
Yep, exactly. So I will be the South Bend passenger princess.
Guys, we do not deserve our wives in any way, shape, or form.
Isn't that a fact? All right, let's get out of here on that. For Trey Reeves, Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Until Saturday night, so long, everybody.
Gracious him. How about